Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. I have a story about an ex-girlfriend that went a bit crazy and really taught me a lesson about dating. Mainly, to get the hell away from anyone that starts to throw red flags at you in high quantities over a short period of time. When I met Adeline, shortened to Lynn, I was immediately smitten. She was everything that I wanted in a girl. She was a solid 10 for me, was super polite to literally everyone, loved the same things as me, and she didn't really have a wild side. I've always been a bit of a wallflower, so I wasn't looking for anyone that had a crazy social life or liked to be out in public all the time. Lynn was, as I got to know her over the couple of weeks before we dated, she was perfect to me, and I fell super hard, super fast. She and I were very happy together for about 3 months. Things were perfect. She would stay at my apartment every weekend, and we were making plans for the future. Lynn seemed that she was the perfect partner for me, and I really thought that we had a very bright time ahead of us. Of course, with the good things come the bad, and around this time, my mother was hit with a cancer diagnosis, and me being her only child, I felt like I needed to commit a lot of time to her to help her where she needed. My dad hasn't been around since I was around 5, so a lot of it fell on my shoulders. I had no problem bearing this weight, as I loved my mother dearly, and I wasn't going to let her struggle. Helping my mother, of course, meant that I wasn't home as much as I used to be. I ended up having to set aside time to take my mother to her treatments, and I ended up staying over at her apartment several nights because I didn't want her to be alone. I had to shave off a lot of time that I got to see Lynn. At first, she was fine with it. She hadn't met my mother, but she said that she understood and that she was supportive of me being the one to help her. This lasted for about 2 weeks, until one night when I got home, she was sitting in the parking lot waiting for me. I was a bit shocked that she was there since it was like 10 at night and I hadn't told her that I was going to be home that night. The only reason I came home is because my mom told me to get some sleep in my bed instead of sleeping on the couch and that she would be fine. She approached me, and as I walked up to my apartment, she seemed happy at first, until I mentioned that I was exhausted. She then immediately started asking me why I was so tired. I told her that I had been helping my mom all day, and that I'd spent the last few hours rearranging furniture to make things more accessible in case that my mom got worse. And then she came back with, "Are you sure you were with your mom? Are you sure you weren't with another woman?" I will say that I may have responded harshly to her when she said this. Something about being accused of cheating after I spent a whole day helping my mother, who needed my help, compounded with the stress of my life at that time, just set me over the edge. I went off on her. I asked who the hell she thought she was to even insinuate that. I called her a few names that I probably shouldn't have, and I then told her to go to hell. Like I said, as much as I really was head over heels for her, I wasn't in a good headspace, and her saying that really messed me up. It was a quick and rash decision to end something that I held dear. But if she was going to go that route while I was dealing with my mother, then I was done. Of course, that was not the end of it. In fact, that was where things started to go insane. A couple days later, I got home from work, and as soon as I walked into my apartment, I wanted to freak out. Nothing was taken or broken, but it was pretty clear that someone had broken into my home and I could pretty quickly figure out who it was there because of the post-it notes all over my apartment. It was stuck to various things, and on each one of them was a personal note. But they were such a mixed bag of emotions. For instance, one said something like, "I miss our late nights together." And then the next said, "I hope you and your new girl die in a fire." It didn't say girl. It used a different word, but I find it degrading, so I won't include it here. You can figure out what she said. There were, if I remember correctly, 170-something notes all over the place. Clearly, she was a bit unhinged with her unfounded accusations. I called Lynn, and I asked her what her problem was, and she told me that she didn't know what I was talking about. I mentioned the notes, and she just kind of tried to play it off like, "Oh, yeah, that. I don't know. I was just in a bad mood." I told her that she had committed a crime by breaking into my apartment, and she laughed and told me that I couldn't prove she did. I, once again, went off on her. I told her that I was done with her and that she needed to move on and get over me because I wanted nothing to do with her. She then said that she wanted me to reconsider my statement, and I doubled down telling her that she needed to leave me alone before I called the cops and got a restraining order. I didn't think I'd actually be able to get one. I just wanted to put it in her head that she needed to leave me alone. That next morning, when I got up to go to my mom's place, I went out to my car and once again, she was waiting in the parking lot. She got out of her car and started to approach me, but I just got in my car and I drove off as fast as I could, hoping that she would get that I was willing to ignore her existence. She then made it really hard to ignore her when I got home and I saw a fire axe sticking in my front door. Like it was seriously dug into the wood and just sitting there. That was a really fun conversation to have with the leasing office, and that I had to come home to that. They certainly thought it was confusing, and that I just had to tell them that I had a nasty breakup. I ended up having to pay them for the door, since it was technically vandalism by someone I knew, which was fine. I didn't really care. Over that week, every day when I would leave, I would see her sitting in the parking lot just staring at me. I wasn't even sure if she was leaving or if she was just living in her car in the parking lot just so she could stalk me. What's even more strange was the fact that this went on for about 10 days. And then, she was just gone. Just like that. She was no longer in the parking lot, and I never saw her again, like at all. She never attempted to contact me again, and she never came back. I have not seen her since that last day, and I have no idea what happened to her, if she just realized that she should move on, or if something actually happened to her, but she has been out of my life completely. While I don't wish harm on anyone, Lynn did put a fire axe through my front door. So, to be honest, I don't have a problem with her just disappearing. Well, that's the story about my ex, the woman that I thought was perfect, that went from 0 to 60 on the crazy scale over the matter of a couple of days, and over something as dumb as me spending more time with my mother who was going through cancer treatments. If anyone wants to know, my mother went into remission and has only had one concerning moment since then. Right now, she's fully in remission and living a very happy life. I've also gone on to a couple other relationships, but nothing long term. Back when I was in high school, I was friends with this eccentric girl named Lisa. Lisa was one of those strange girls, the kind that wear quirky colors, but also tried to dress goth. And I really did like her as a friend, but she could be a bit much at times. I was on the football team, and while I wasn't in the jock clique, I will say that I wasn't in her normal friend group. The reason I ended up being friends with her was because in freshman year, I actually ended up in a group with her for a final project in our biology class, and I learned that she was a pretty interesting individual. I wouldn't say we were close friends even, but we were friends, and we would chat whenever we were together in a classroom or whatever, but nothing beyond that. She has never showed any interest in me beyond friendship, and I wasn't interested in her beyond friendship too, and that was that. However, in junior year, things did change a little bit. I started a relationship with one of Lisa's friends, Shelby. Lisa actually got us together because Shelby had a crush on me and I had a thing for her too. So, obviously, the relationship had Lisa's blessing. Being with Shelby meant that I ended up spending more time with Lisa. When we would hang out after school, Lisa would typically want to come over, and again, Lisa was alright, but she started to feel like a third wheel. It got to a point where Lisa would start texting me, asking me what I was doing, and at first I just thought that she was being friendly. But at one point, it got to be a bit much when she called me at 3 a.m. to ask me if Shelby and I were going to hang out that day. I got a bit cross with her, telling her not to call me in the middle of the night, and she just sort of apologized and then hung up. That day, when I went over to Shelby's house, I told her about the call, and she freaked out, saying that Lisa had been doing the same thing to her, that she would call her every night for the last 2 weeks, asking about random things. We talked it through, and we both decided that we needed to put up some boundaries with Lisa, especially when we were spending time together. We got to a point where we would make plans to go somewhere, and we wouldn't tell Lisa. We wouldn't mention it around her at all. One weekend, we went to the movies just to get out and go on a date, and after we'd sat down during the previews, who else would show up? It was Lisa. She walked in the theater with a large popcorn bucket in her hand, and when she saw us, she excitedly yelled, "Oh my God, there you two are!" The entire theater looked back at us, and I'm sure that they immediately thought that we were going to be a problem. I just shushed her and asked her what she was doing, and she said that she wanted to see a movie and that she saw us walk in the theater earlier, and that her seeing the same movie was a complete coincidence. Well, I didn't buy it, and based on the look on Shelby's face, she didn't either. Shelby just said something like, "Oh, wow, what a coincidence." And Lisa sat in the seat next to us, and the whole time, she was being obnoxiously loud and annoying. It got to a point where one of the theater employees came into the room during the movie and actually asked us to leave. We tried to tell them that we weren't with her, but they didn't care. She was being loud and was sitting with us, so we were all asked to get out. I didn't want to end up getting trespassed from the movies or told not to come back, so Shelby and I just got up and started leaving. When Lisa started yelling at the employee, she started screaming about how everyone in the theater was discriminating against her and how she, as an American, was allowed to say what she wanted. I'm going to be honest, I have no idea what she was going on about with all of that, but it was embarrassing to be seen associated with her. I nudged Shelby to go and she agreed, and we made our way out of the theater as quickly as we could. When we got out, we heard Lisa yell for us and ask why we left her in there like that. Shelby actually went off on her, telling her that she was an embarrassment and that she was acting like an absolute idiot and that she had completely ruined our date. At this last part, Lisa's shocked face kind of turned to a slight grin, which again telegraphed exactly what she was doing. Ruining our day was her plan, and she'd managed to do so. After Shelby finished saying what she had to say, she grabbed my arm and then pulled me away, saying that she couldn't stand to be around Lisa right then. I agreed. We walked away and we got in my car to leave. Lisa just stood there with her stupid grin on her face and waved at us, saying that she'd see us around. It didn't end there, of course. It got to a point where Shelby had to block Lisa's number because she started calling at all hours of the night again. Sometimes she would be sobbing, telling her how sorry she was. Some nights, she would call and be pretty obviously pretending to be drunk and talk about how she and I had slept together, which was a complete lie. One night, she called and told Shelby that she was in love with her and that they should run away together and never come back. Mind you, we were 17 and Lisa was 16 at this time. After Shelby blocked her, Lisa then started texting and calling me randomly, telling me that she was in love with me and that we should be together. I told her that she was nuts and that I loved Shelby and I wanted nothing to do with her. She laughed when I said this, saying that I didn't love Shelby and that I was just using her as a means to get with her. I hung up on her and then I blocked her number. One of the last occurrences happened one day after football practice. At this point, it had been about a month since Lisa had really done anything or contacted either of us, probably because we had blocked her number. When practice was over, Shelby and I went to get in my car to get home, and when I opened my driver's side door, I saw a manila envelope sitting on the center console. I asked her if it was hers, and she said no. I knew it wasn't mine, so I got in and grabbed it, and when I flipped it over, my heart stopped. The front said, "From Lisa to the love of my life." I just stared at those words and kind of froze. How had she gotten into my car? And worse, what was going to be in the envelope? Shelby asked what the hell it was, and I told her that I didn't know and that I didn't want to know. She asked if I should open it, and at first I considered it, but then I had a second thought. I told her not to open it and that I knew what we should do. I put my car in drive and I went straight to Lisa's house. I went and knocked on the door. I was actually thankful when her mother answered and not her. I asked if Lisa was home and she told me that she wasn't, that she had to stay after school and would be home soon, which was the second blessing in this situation. Thankfully, her parents knew both Shelby and I, and they knew Shelby a bit more. But since I was Shelby's boyfriend, they knew who I was too. I asked her if we could come in and talk with her for a moment about Lisa, and while she was confused, she invited us in. When we got into the living room, I handed her the envelope and told her that I had found that in my car, and I then started telling her about all the things that Lisa had been doing. I told her that I respected Lisa and that she was my friend, but that something needed to be done about how she was acting. Her mother asked what was in the envelope, and I told her that I had no idea, that we hadn't opened it yet. I watched her open the envelope and pull out a stack of Polaroids, and as soon as she flipped through the first few, her face went completely white as a sheet, and she quietly said, "Oh my God." And almost as if on cue, Lisa walked in the front door, and the three of us all looked over at her as she quietly asked what was going on. Her mother stood up and turned to look at her, and when she did, I was able to catch a glimpse of one of the photos. It was exactly what you might think. It was a photo of Lisa in a very inappropriate way. I stood up and said that Shelby and I should probably leave them to talk about things, and her mother told me that she appreciated me bringing this to her attention and that nothing like this would ever happen again. Shelby and I left, and the whole time we were walking to the door, Lisa was watching us with an incredibly angry look on her face, which should have left me feeling guilty, but what she was doing was way over the line. As we were walking down the front steps, I could hear her mother starting in on her, asking why she was taking nude pictures of herself and giving them to her friend like that. Again, I should have felt bad, but there's only so much one can take until pity no longer becomes an option. And as we drove back to my house, Shelby asked if what we did was the right thing to do. I told her that we could have handled it differently, but that it had been done months at this point, and that Lisa hadn't gotten the hint. I then mentioned that since Lisa was still 16, and what she had put in that envelope and in my car was 100% illegal, that she could have called the cops and told them that I had those pictures and that I would have likely been arrested for it. And when I mentioned that, I think Shelby understood what I was saying and agreed with my sentiment. She asked if I thought that was the plan, and I told her that I didn't know, but that I wouldn't have put it past her. That was the last major event with Lisa, thankfully. She still tried to talk to us some, and she would sometimes send us a text from a different number, asking if we could talk about everything. But we pretty much blocked her out and told her that we were done. Shelby and I are actually married now, happily so, and we have a 2-year-old. So, thankfully, Lisa wasn't able to drive a wedge between us like she wanted. The only reason I even thought about this story was because Lisa tried to send Shelby a friend request on Facebook, as is the cliche reason. Shelby considered accepting it, and I told her that it was her choice, but also mentioned that junior year was only 10 years ago and that there's a high chance that she's still the same person she was before. In the end, I hope that Lisa has a great life. I hope she finds someone else to fill the role of love of her life, because it's not me. And I hope that she can live out her days with them, because I never want to see her again. A few years ago, I was in a relationship with a guy named James. He's male and 20, and we were in a relationship for 3 years. In the beginning, he was wonderful. He supported me during my chemotherapy. He was kind and funny, a bit crazy, but not in a creepy way. He helped me surviving through my sickness, and I won't be alive without him right now. But the last year of our relationship, he changed. He wanted to try new experiences and began taking drugs. I didn't know he was an addict until our breakup. He was totally different. He was jealous, a liar, sometimes wicked with me, and he cheated on me before our breakup. To be honest, I have pity for him. So after the breakup, I've spent 6 months helping him. I was a student. He was always at my home, in pain, trying to fight his addiction. But I stopped when after a month in an institute, he started drugs again like 3 hours after leaving. It's a sad story, but it gets worse. During our relationship, I chose my university to be close to him, so I had nobody around, no friends, no family. And 1 month after cutting the rope, something strange happened. Everything began with my cat. One night, I went outside to see a movie. On my way home, it started raining, and I remember that I left my cat outside. It's a really nice cat, but he hates water, but I think it's the same with every cat, I guess. I started running to be home early, and when I opened the door, my cat was on the sofa. First, I thought, what a dumbass. The cat was not outside at all. But then, I hugged him, and my cat was completely wet. It feels weird, I thought. What the hell? And then, I thought my neighbors could have opened the door to let the cat in, so I just shrugged it off. 1 week later, I realized that some of my clothes were missing, particularly my underwear. I've got ADHD, so I just blame myself for losing my own clothes. But same with my food and some plates. Like one of my favorite bowl disappeared. It was a student's apartment, so it's not big enough to lose that many things. But again, I just blame myself for it. I even called myself a magician, joking about how I can make everything disappear without trying. But I lost my mind when I came back from my parents' house and I discovered my place totally changed. There was the neighbor's mails on my table with a mysterious headphone. My photos on the wall were upside down and a black umbrella was on my bed. I didn't own an umbrella. It was scary as hell, so I called my mom and then the police. The officer was nice, but he told me that there was nothing that he can do except taking my complaint. I didn't know who was doing this to me. My ex never had my keys, and even when I said that I don't want to talk to him anymore, I stayed nice. I didn't think anybody wanted to hurt me or scare me. I mean, for what? A joke? If that's it, well, ha ha, hilarious. But I slept with a knife for 2 years. My neighbors started getting scared too. We had a common basement, and someone breaks the door during the night. We find some supplies in it, like a blanket and a plate, which is not mine, by the way. I had chains on the inside of my door too, so I felt secured when I was inside, but I was scared to leave and coming back to see again my stuff missing. A few weeks go by, and in the evening, I had to go to the grocery store. It took me like 30 minutes, not that long really, but when I came back home, there was a note on my bedroom mirror. Nothing written on it, just a smiley. Well, that was enough to freak me out and I left immediately. Again, I called the police and they told me that I could have left the note and just forgot about it. But I didn't have those kinds of little sticky yellow paper, so I don't see how. I stayed with my mom for a week, so I spent all my economies on a camera and post for help on social media because I felt totally distraught. But there was still nothing. In the meantime, James' sister came to talk to me, saying that one of my favorite jackets was at their parents' house. I remembered wearing this jacket after saying that I wanted to end things with James. But again, I've got ADHD, so I might have forgotten it. But I didn't see James' parents for like 8 months at this time, so I found that difficult to believe. I also suspected one of my neighbors who had one of my keys and was feeding my cat. But she was in another country during most of the story, so it couldn't have been her. I talked with James last year about that, and he swore that he never done something that weird and told me that he was in a cure center when all of this shit happened. Everything stopped after that though, so I still don't know who did this, and neither why. Maybe it was my ex? Maybe someone else. Now, I don't really care, but this is the creepiest thing that has ever happened to me. So to my stalker, let's not meet again. One time, I was at Walmart with my dad. This wasn't a large Walmart. It was one of those neighborhood grocery stores or smaller versions. I believe I was about 8 or 9 when this happened, and I'm now in my 30s. We were grocery shopping like any other night, and on this particular night, my dad and I were walking towards the exit after checking out, when suddenly, my dad realized that he forgot the toilet paper. We hadn't left the store quite yet, and we were right outside of the bathroom or drinking fountains. which, from what I have seen, are typically placed in the same general location in most Walmarts. And my dad said, "Wait right here by the basket. I'll be right back." This wasn't unusual since I was allowed to go grab things that I needed on my own, like shampoo, soap, and whatnot, and I knew to be on my guard. And it couldn't have been more than 2 minutes that I found myself being approached by a man. To be honest, I can't remember much else other than the fact that he was a man and he was a lot older than me. I can't remember his face or height or what he was wearing, and the rest is a total blur. This man came up to me and said, "Hey." And I remember looking up at the man as I gripped the handles of the basket. "I have puppies in my car. I've also got candy." You know, the whole spiel that all of our parents warned us about. The man began to wave me toward him, and he reached his hand out as though he would place it on my shoulder. I held onto the basket handle as tight as I could, and in that exact moment, I heard my dad shout, "Hey!" It was almost an actual roar. The man reacted instantly and moved so quickly through the exit doors that it almost looked like he evaporated. My dad grabbed me and was likely putting together the pieces faster than my little brain was processing the whole thing. But since nothing actually came of this, I can't say for sure what the man's motives were. Regardless, my dad will always be my hero, and I'll never forget the lesson that I learned that day about the importance of being aware of your surroundings at all times, no matter how often you've been somewhere or how comfortable you may feel there. My story is one that is pretty messed up, and I'm not saying that lightly. This was probably the lowest point of my life. It was absolutely something that gave me some sort of PTSD. But it's an important story for me to tell the world, in my opinion. I was abused, and I was mistreated by this person. It's a bumpy ride, so if that's not something you can stomach, then I don't recommend reading the rest of this. I dated a guy named Cole for most of my time in high school. I met him at the end of my freshman year, and we actually started dating at the beginning of my sophomore year, and we were together until we graduated. Neither of us was one of the popular kids, and neither of us really stood out of the crowd, so we just kind of really enjoyed each other's company. And being together with someone that was like me was really nice. Well, that's what it was on the outside, at least. To everyone in school, my parents, and the public eye, we were just two shy high school kids that liked each other and held hands. But in private, however, he was emotionally manipulative and horribly controlling. My home life wasn't great. My parents argued non-stop, and they were always so aggressive with each other. So I guess as I was growing up, I kind of connected that to love. So when Cole started doing the same thing to me that they did to each other, I thought it was normal. It didn't take long for that emotional manipulation to turn into physical abuse and then to sexual abuse. Basically, if he wanted to do something, we would just do it, and I had to accept it because he loved me, and that was that. This went on for over 1.5 years until spring break of my senior year. I spent the week over at my grandmother's house in an attempt to get away from him, even for just a little bit. Though I framed it that I hadn't spent time with my granny for a while, which was true. While I was there though, my grandma actually saw a bruise that was on my inner thigh, and the whole thing spiraled. I broke down, and I told her everything. She was horrified to hear what had been happening between us. But once she had calmed me down, she basically told me that I needed to exit this relationship as quickly as I could. We talked about it some more, and I agreed with her, and she had convinced me that I needed to get away from Cole, and I needed to get away as soon as possible. Once spring break was over, he came over to my house, and I was adamant that we needed to spend time in the living room instead of my own room, because I knew what would happen if we went behind closed doors. Throughout the evening, I just kind of sat alone on the couch and kept my distance while I prepared for what I had to do. And then, once he had to leave, I ended up telling him that I thought that we should take a break from each other. I saw by the look on his face that he wanted to smack me, something he had pretty much turned into his rebuttal when he thought what I said was wrong. But he didn't, because my mom was in the other room, and he had to keep up his good kid appearances. He asked me if I was sure that I wanted to do that in a way that almost sounded threatening, but I nodded and said that I had enjoyed our time together, but that I needed some time to think things through. He basically just left after that, but he did not leave me alone. He was dead set on winning me back in some way. Whether that meant by telling me how much I meant to him, or telling me that I would be sorry for what I had done. I tried my best to ignore the notes, the letters in the mailbox, the constant phone calls, but I couldn't ignore the literal brick through my window. Yes, he literally threw a brick through my window, complete with a small note that said, "I love you, Kayla, and I will die without you," complete with his signature. Thankfully, that was enough to make this whole thing a lot easier, as my dad called the cops and he was subsequently arrested because he admitted that he did it. I was actually happy that this happened because I would be able to move on and focus on school, and he wouldn't be there to distract or bother me. I thought that that's where it all ended. He was charged, he was told to stay away, and I finished high school without any issues. After I graduated, I moved out and then moved in with my grandparents, and then I went to college. I spent 4 years furthering my education and lived with them. Then, I went and got my own place a few miles from their house in an apartment complex down the way. I lived there for 6 years, so at this point, I had been on my own for a decade, and I had started my career, and I had met a guy that I was dating, and things were pretty serious. Basically, I had moved on with my life, and I was happy despite what I had gone through. Recovery was difficult, but I felt like I had successfully managed to do so. Unfortunately, things went south really fast one random day when I got a phone call from a number that I didn't know. I answered it. I wish that I hadn't, because as soon as I said hello, the voice on the other end said, "Hey, Kayla, it's Cole," in a tone that was way too excited to be on this call. And as soon as he said his name, my blood ran cold and there were legitimate chills running down my spine. This was a voice that I never wanted to hear again, and the fact that he had somehow found my phone number was something else altogether. I kind of sheepishly said hi and then asked what he wanted. He laughed when I responded, and then he said something like, "Don't sound so excited to talk to me." Then started in with what he was calling for. He asked me if I would be a reference for a job that he was applying for because he needed someone to tell them that he was a good person and willing to do the work. I basically just said okay, and I wrapped up the call as quickly as I could. The feeling in my stomach was literally the worst thing that I had felt since he and I were together. I ended up telling my boyfriend what had happened, and thankfully, he was fully supportive and willing to keep me calm and talk me through the situation. And at the end of it, he pretty much told me that I should just not answer any numbers that I didn't recognize and just move on and pretend that it never happened. He then said that if I wanted, we could go up and change my number. I told him that it was okay and that I would just not answer any more calls that I didn't know. That would have been a great solution and would have been enough if what happened next didn't happen. About a week after what happened, I went into the office to work, and sitting in the lobby was Cole. I opened the door and literally just froze the second that I saw him, and my heart was racing, and I'm pretty sure that I started hyperventilating because I was feeling dizzy. As soon as he saw me, he stood up and walked over to me, grabbing me and then pulling me into a hug. I had no idea what to do. I just stood there, frozen, with his arms around me and not letting me go. I wanted to cry. I wanted to throw up. I wanted to literally just stop existing. He was talking in my ear about how much he'd missed me since high school and how happy he was to see me. He said that he was there for an interview to work in the IT department, which was the exact department that I worked in, and said that he was so excited that he may be working with me. Then what he said made my heart stop. It could be just like the old times. As soon as he said that, I immediately pulled myself away from him and I walked away as quickly as I could to go and talk to my manager. I walked into his office and I knew that he could see something was wrong because he stood up and asked me if I was okay. I let loose, asking him if there was someone named Cole there for an interview. He told me he was, and that he was there to interview for a position that was on our team, and then asked if I knew him. I explained everything to him. I pretty much just dumped the entirety of my trauma on him, and I told him that Cole was the cause of it. He then followed that up with saying that he would keep what I said in mind and asked me if I had a restraining order on Cole. I knew what this meant. It meant that he did not care and that he was going to proceed as if I never told him any of this. The restraining order question was a matter of covering himself legally. I told him no, and he ended the conversation pretty much right away. I went back to my desk, but I think that I spent most of that day in the bathroom, just staring at the wall and having a panic attack. That was the last day that I worked there, because I knew what was going on. Some of you may say that it was purely coincidence that he was interviewing for the same company that I was working at, but it wasn't. He didn't seem surprised to see me. He never once said anything about not knowing I worked there, and his comments made me feel more like he knew it, and he was trying to pretend like he didn't. I know it sounds paranoid, but he got my number, and he went to my office, and he interviewed for a position in my team. None of this was a coincidence. Like I said, I ended up quitting that day. Didn't even put in my 2 weeks just in case. I wasn't willing to give him any more time around me. I also went and changed my number after that day, so he didn't have it. Thankfully, this time around, I had more of a support system in place. My boyfriend, my grandparents, and a few friends. They all supported me in my decision, and they helped me get my mind straight. So that's it. That's the story of my horrible ex that showed up randomly in my life 10 years later. It was hard to get through, and I still feel like someday he's going to show back up in my life to cause me more distress. But thankfully, he hasn't. If he ever does, I'm honestly not sure what I'll do, or what it will do to me. And here's the riddle for this video. Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate each and every one of you. But I would also like to thank my amazing patrons, my top tippers, and my dearest channel members. Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it with all of my heart. If you want to support the channel further, you could also choose to become a patron, a tipper, or a channel member. But remember, it's appreciated, but never a requirement. I would also like to announce that we have merch now. The link is in the description of the video, along with all my other social media links, like my Discord server, Twitter, Instagram, and others. You can connect with me and send your stories there. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and comments are highly appreciated. And remember, your fear feeds me.